And to my youngest daughter, Rebecca, I leave the wine cellar and all its contents." The lawyer's words hung in the air of my parents' study as my older siblings, Amanda and Peter, exchanged smirks. They'd already divided up the real prizes: the mansion, the investment accounts, the vacation homes, and Dad's successful import business. "At least you got something," Amanda said with fake sympathy. "Though I'm not sure those dusty old bottles are worth the storage fees." I said nothing, remembering my last conversation with Dad 3 weeks before he passed. He'd taken me down to the wine cellar, something he'd done countless times throughout my childhood. While my siblings had dismissed his wine collecting as an old man's hobby, I'd spent hours with him learning about vintages, regions, and proper storage. "Promise me something, Becca," he'd said, his hand resting on a seemingly ordinary rack of bottles. "Promise you'll never sell the collection, not even one bottle." "I promise, Dad," I'd replied, puzzled by his intensity. "But why?" "Just remember," he'd interrupted, his eyes twinkling with that familiar spark of mischief. "Sometimes the most valuable things are hidden in plain sight." Now, watching my siblings divide up their millions, I wondered what he'd meant. The wine cellar, while extensive, had never seemed particularly valuable. Most of the bottles appeared to be everyday wines, nothing that would interest serious collectors. "Ms. Williams?" The lawyer's voice pulled me from my memories. "Your father left this for you as well." He handed me an envelope with "For Rebecca. Open alone," written in Dad's distinctive handwriting. Peter snorted. Probably instructions on how to drink cheap wine. I tucked the envelope into my purse, ignoring their laughter. After the will reading, I drove straight to the estate, using my key to enter the wine cellar. The familiar smell of oak and earth welcomed me as I descended the stone steps. Everything looked exactly as it had during my last visit with Dad. Rows of bottles lined the walls, their labels dusty but legible. Nothing seemed remarkable or particularly valuable. Sitting on a wooden stool by Dad's old tasting table, I opened his letter. "My dearest Becca, if you're reading this, then you've inherited what appears to be a modest wine cellar. Your siblings, like most people, see only what's on the surface. But you've always looked deeper, understood that true value isn't always obvious. Remember all those hours we spent discussing wine? The stories I told about each bottle? There was more to those lessons than just wine appreciation. Look at the third rack from the left, 5th row up. Find the 1982 Bordeaux with the slightly torn label. Pull it forward, but don't drop it. All my love, Dad." My heart pounding, I followed his instructions. The bottle moved strangely, like a lever, and suddenly there was a soft click. The entire rack swung outward, revealing a hidden door with a keypad. My hands trembling, I entered the date Dad had always said was the most important in wine history, the day Prohibition ended. The door opened silently, revealing a chamber I'd never known existed. Inside, illuminated by soft lighting, was a collection that made me gasp. Hundreds of bottles, each one a legendary vintage. First growth Bordeaux from the 1800s, pre-phylloxera Burgundies, wines that I'd only read about in Dad's old books. A leather-bound ledger sat on a climate-controlled desk. Opening it, I found meticulous records of each bottle's provenance, complete with authentication certificates and purchase records. The total value made me dizzy, over $40 million at current market prices. But there was more. A second ledger detailed Dad's real business, not just importing wine, but authenticating and trading rare vintages for an exclusive network of collectors. The wine cellar above had been a clever cover, making the estate appear unremarkable to potential thieves. A letter lay beside the ledgers. "Becca, now you understand why I made you promise not to sell. This collection represents 40 years of carefully built relationships with the world's most serious wine collectors. They trust our family because we've always operated with discretion and expertise. Your siblings see wine as just expensive grape juice. You understand it's about history, culture, and connections. That's why you're reading this letter instead of them. The collection is well documented and fully insured. My attorney, Mr. Phillips, has all the necessary paperwork. He's been handling the legal aspects for decades and will help you understand everything. But first, you need to prepare. Amanda and Peter won't stop at trying to claim the cellar once they realize what they've missed. They'll try everything to gain control. Don't let them. You're ready for this, Becca. You understand what makes wine truly valuable, not just its price, but its story, its history, the connections it creates between people and cultures. All my love, Dad P has checked the small black book in the corner. You'll find tomorrow's appointment particularly interesting. The book contained details of a meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning with the curator of rare wines for the royal family interested in acquiring several pre-war Burgundies. The bottles in question sat in a special case nearby, their combined value enough to buy a small island. As I stood in that hidden room, surrounded by liquid history worth millions, I heard Amanda's words echo. At least you got something. I smiled, thinking of all the exclusive tastings Dad had hosted in the modest cellar above, quietly maintaining relationships with the world's most influential collectors, while others underestimated him. Tomorrow would be interesting indeed. Looking back at Dad's letter, I noticed a line I'd missed before. P.P.S. The security cameras have already caught Peter trying to inventory the cellar tonight. The footage might be useful later. I checked the sophisticated security system's feed. Sure enough, there was Peter, sneaking around with a wine pricing app, probably looking for anything valuable enough to challenge the will over. That's when I truly understood. Dad hadn't just left me a wine collection. He'd left me everything I needed to protect it. The cellar bell chimed. Someone had entered. Through the security monitor, I saw Amanda wandering the outer cellar, probably looking for expensive labels she could claim had sentimental value. Let her look, I thought. The real treasures were safe behind stone and steel, waiting for someone who understood their true worth. Just like Dad had waited for someone who understood his. The next morning, I arrived at the cellar early to prepare for the royal family's curator meeting. Amanda's Mercedes was already parked outside, and I could see Peter's Range Rover turning into the driveway. Perfect timing. I straightened my vintage Cartier watch, a gift from Dad that my siblings had always dismissed as a reproduction, and waited. Becca. Amanda's voice carried down the cellar stairs. We need to talk about proper storage for these wines. Peter and I think. Later, I interrupted, checking my phone. I have an appointment. An appointment? Peter scoffed as he joined us. In this dusty cellar. With who? The cellar door opened again, and Sir James Wellington, chief wine curator for the royal family, descended the stairs. His assistant followed, carrying specialized cases for transporting rare wines. Ms. Williams? Sir James extended his hand. Your father spoke highly of you. He said you inherited his palate for fine vintages. I led them to the tasting room, the public one, leaving my siblings staring open-mouthed. This needs to be a family discussion, Amanda called after me. Later, I repeated, I have business to conduct. In the tasting room, I used the hidden elevator system I discovered last night to bring up the pre-war Burgundies from the vault. Dad had thought of everything, creating a way to access the collection without revealing its location. Magnificent, Sir James breathed, examining the bottles. The provenance documentation. I provided the comprehensive records Dad had maintained. As you can see, the chain of ownership is unbroken since they left the vineyard in 1939. After an hour of examination and discussion, Sir James made his decision. The royal household would acquire the Burgundies for £2.8 million, maintaining the same discretion that had characterized their 30-year relationship with my father. When I emerged from the tasting room, my siblings were still there, trying to look casual while obviously burning with curiosity. What was that about? Amanda demanded. Just business, I replied. The kind Dad taught me while you were both too busy to learn about cheap bottles. Now look here, Peter stepped forward, his face reddening. This is ridiculous. We had that cellar assessed. You had the public cellar assessed. I corrected him, the part Dad wanted you to see. That stopped him short. What are you talking about? Why don't we discuss it over dinner? Bring your lawyers. You'll need them after your failed inventory attempt last night. Peter went pale. Amanda's perfectly maintained facade cracked. You're bluffing, she whispered. I pulled out my phone and played the security footage. Dad believed in good security. He also believed in keeping evidence. They left quickly after that, already on their phones with their lawyers, but I knew this was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I discovered the true scope of Dad's wine empire. The cellar was just one node in a network of relationships he'd built across the global wine trade. His reputation for authenticity and discretion had made him the go-to dealer for legitimate collectors worldwide. The public cellar served multiple purposes: a cover for the real collection, a way to spot potential clients, and most importantly, a test of character. How people treated what they thought was a modest wine cellar revealed everything about how they handled truly valuable vintages. My siblings, predictably, launched a legal challenge to the will. They claimed Dad hadn't been of sound mind, that I had manipulated him, that the cellar's true value had been concealed from him. But Dad had prepared for that too. Mr. Phillips, his lawyer, presented years of documentation showing his careful evaluation of all his children. Notes about Peter's attempts to sell off worthless wines for quick cash. Records of Amanda's complaints about the embarrassing cellar and her refusal to learn about wine, and detailed observations of my own growing understanding of both wine and people. Your father, Mr. Phillips told me after we won the court case, was playing a very long game. He needed someone who understood that true value isn't always obvious in wine or in people. The victory was comprehensive. Amanda and Peter were forced to pay damages for the attempted inventory theft and sign agreements preventing them from interfering with the business. But success brought its own challenges. Running an international wine trading business required more than just knowledge of vintages and regions. It needed discretion, judgment, and an ability to read people as carefully as you read wine labels. Gradually, I built my own reputation while maintaining Dad's high standards. The public cellar continued to operate, still serving as both cover and testing ground. I even hired Peter's daughter, who shared my love of wine and had her grandfather's eye for quality, as an apprentice, proving that sometimes taste skips a generation. 1 year after Dad's death, I sat in a hidden vault with a glass of his favorite Bordeaux, reading his personal journals. One entry stood out. The greatest treasures aren't always the ones in plain sight. Sometimes they're the people others overlook, the potential others miss, the value others are too blind to see. Becca understands this. That's why she'll take what I've built and make it even stronger. He'd been right, of course. The real inheritance wasn't just the multi-million-dollar wine collection or the network of international clients. It was the wisdom to see beyond surfaces, to understand that true worth often hides behind modest labels. Amanda and Peter had inherited the mansion and money, the obvious wealth. But I had inherited something far more valuable. A legacy built on understanding, patience, and the ability to recognize treasure in unexpected places. 2 years later, at a private tasting for select clients, Amanda approached me with an unusual request. Would you teach me about wine? Really teach me? I think I finally understand what Dad was trying to show us all those years. I smiled, remembering all her past comments about cheap bottles. I'd be happy to, I said. After all, someone needs to explain that real value isn't always what it appears to be. Looking around the cellar that night, after everyone had gone, I touched the bottle that concealed the vault's entrance. Dad's voice seemed to echo in the silence. Sometimes the most valuable things are hidden in plain sight. How right he'd been. The real treasure wasn't just the wines in the vault. It was in the lessons he taught me, the wisdom he'd shared, and the understanding that true value, whether in wine or in people, often lies beneath the surface, waiting for someone patient enough to discover it. Just like Dad had seen the potential in me when everyone else saw just another girl who liked to drink wine with her father. And that, I realized, was the greatest inheritance of all.